May 14th, 1983, 1 o'clock in the morning. Interstate 5, Mission Viejo, California. A Toyota Celica weaves erratically between lanes on the freeway. Two California Highway Patrol officers, Michael Howard and Michael Sterling, notice the vehicle and signal for it to pull over. The driver complies immediately, parking on the shoulder. The officers approach cautiously, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Behind the wheel sits a 38-year-old man with glasses and a mustache. Well-dressed, polite. He seems intoxicated but cooperative. Officer Sterling shines his light toward the passenger seat and freezes. A young man slumped against the door, head tilted back, eyes partially open, completely motionless. The driver looks at the officers calmly and asks, in a tone that would haunt investigators for decades, "How's my friend?" That friend was Terry Lee Gambrell, 25 years old, a United States Marine. He was already dead. But what the officers would find next in the trunk of that Toyota would reveal something far more terrifying than a single murder. Piece of paper. A list. 61 cryptic entries. Coded phrases that made no sense at first glance. Stable. Marine Carson. 2 in 1 hitch. What you got? Each entry, investigators would soon discover, represented a human life. A victim. A son. A brother. Someone who never came home. The man behind the wheel was Randy Stephen Kraft. Computer programmer. Respected professional. Longtime resident of Long Beach. And possibly one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. This is the story of how a seemingly ordinary man became a monster who documented his own atrocities like a twisted collector keeping score. This is the story of the scorecard killer. To understand how Randy Kraft became what he became, we must go back to the beginning. Because nothing about his early life suggested the horror that would follow. Randy Stephen Kraft was born on March 19, 1945, in Long Beach, California. He was the fourth and youngest child of Harold and Opal Kraft. His father worked at Douglas Aircraft Company. His mother balanced multiple jobs as a seamstress and a school cook, dedicating herself to providing for her children. By all accounts, the Kraft household was stable and conventional. Middle class, respectable, the kind of family you'd see at church on Sundays. The kind of family that neighbors would describe as nice people. But Randy's childhood was marked by a series of unusual accidents. At just 1 year old, he broke his clavicle. At 2, he fell and was knocked unconscious. These incidents raised no particular alarm at the time, but they would later become points of speculation for psychologists trying to understand the origins of his violent behavior. Could early head trauma have played a role? Or were these simply the normal bumps and bruises of childhood, later scrutinized through the lens of hindsight? What is certain is that Randy was bright, exceptionally bright. He excelled in school, graduating 10th in his class of 390 students at Westminster High School. He wasn't just academically gifted. He was involved. Boy Scouts, tennis team, debate club, the kind of well-rounded student that colleges compete for. His teachers remembered him as polite, articulate, and ambitious. His classmates saw him as somewhat reserved but friendly enough. There were no warning signs, no cruel behavior toward animals, no violent outbursts, no red flags that might have predicted what was to come. In 1963, Randy enrolled at Claremont Men's College on a scholarship, majoring in economics. This was the era of the Vietnam War, and like many young Americans, Randy was swept up in the political turmoil of the time. Interestingly, he began college as a conservative, a supporter of Richard Nixon and traditional Republican values. But over his years at Claremont, he underwent a dramatic political transformation, emerging as a liberal and an outspoken opponent of the war. It was also during his college years that Randy began to understand something fundamental about himself. He was gay. In 1969, an era when homosexuality was still widely stigmatized, criminalized in many places and classified as a mental disorder by the American Psychiatric Association, this realization carried enormous weight. After graduating, Randy enlisted in the United States Air Force, but his military career was short-lived. In 1969, he was discharged for what official records describe as medical reasons. The reality, though never officially confirmed in military documents, was almost certainly related to his sexuality. The military's policies on homosexuality at that time were harsh and unforgiving. Randy returned to Long Beach and embraced the city's burgeoning gay community. Long Beach, particularly areas like Belmont Shore and Sunset Beach, had become a haven for gay men seeking acceptance and community in Southern California. Randy found work as a bartender, a job that put him in the heart of the nightlife scene. He was charming, intelligent, and well-liked by patrons and co-workers alike. By all appearances, Randy Kraft was living an open, authentic life. He had friends. He dated. He seemed at peace with his identity in a way that was remarkable for that time. But in March of 1970, an incident occurred that, in retrospect, was a clear warning sign. A 13-year-old boy named Joseph Alwyn Fancher had run away from home and was hitchhiking when Randy picked him up. What happened next is documented in police reports. Randy took the boy back to his apartment. He gave him alcohol and pills. He sexually abused him. But unlike the victims that would come later, Joseph Fancher survived. He escaped and reported what had happened to the police. Officers went to Randy's apartment and searched it without a warrant, a violation that would ultimately doom any prosecution. The case was dropped. Randy faced no charges, no consequences, no record. For Randy Kraft, this may have been a pivotal moment. He had committed a serious crime and walked away. The system had failed to stop him, and perhaps in his mind he believed he was untouchable. The question that haunts investigators to this day is simple but chilling. If the police had acted differently in 1970, if that case had been prosecuted properly, how many lives could have been saved? We'll never know the answer, because what came next was a nightmare that would span more than a decade. The first murder attributed to Randy Kraft occurred in September of 1971, just 18 months after the incident with Joseph Fancher. The victim was Wayne Joseph Duquette, 30 years old, a bartender at a gay bar called The Stable. Wayne disappeared after his shift one night. His body was found days later, dumped in a remote area. He had been strangled. The crime scene showed signs of a struggle, but there was little physical evidence. No witnesses, no clear suspects. The case went cold almost immediately. At the time, the murder of a gay man in Southern California generated minimal public attention. Homophobia was deeply entrenched in law enforcement and media. Crimes against gay men were often dismissed, underinvestigated, or blamed on the lifestyle itself. This cultural blindness would allow Randy Kraft and other killers targeting gay men to operate with relative impunity for years. On the surface, Randy's life continued normally. He enrolled at California State University, Long Beach, pursuing a teaching credential in elementary education. He maintained his bartending jobs. He dated men, including a serious relationship with Jeffrey Paul Graves, a fellow student. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, something dark was growing. In December of 1972, Edward Daniel Moore vanished. He was 20 years old, a Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton. His body was discovered alongside Interstate 405, north of Westminster. He had been strangled and mutilated. His pants were pulled down around his ankles. There were signs of sexual assault and torture. The pattern was beginning to emerge, though investigators didn't yet see it. Young men, late teens to mid-20s, many of them Marines or military personnel, most of them hitchhiking or last seen getting into a car with a stranger. The method was consistent. Randy would pick up his victims, often offering them a ride or inviting them to party. He would ply them with alcohol and drugs, particularly sedatives like Valium and Ativan, rendering them helpless. Then came the torture, strangulation, sexual assault, mutilation, and finally, the disposal of the body along a freeway or remote roadside. What made Randy particularly dangerous was his intelligence and planning. He didn't kill in a frenzy. He was methodical, organized. He chose victims who were transient or disconnected from stable support systems. Hitchhikers, runaways, young Marines on leave, people whose disappearances might not be immediately noticed or thoroughly investigated. Between 1972 and 1975, Bodies began appearing with disturbing regularity along Southern California's freeways. But law enforcement agencies didn't connect the dots. Each jurisdiction investigated its own cases in isolation. There was no coordinated effort, no task force, no recognition that a serial killer was operating across multiple counties. In May of 1975, Randy Kraft came onto the police radar for the first time in connection with the murders. Two young men, Keith Crotwell and Kent May, had disappeared after being seen getting into a distinctive car, a black and white Mustang. Witnesses provided a partial license plate number. That number led police to Randy Kraft. Detectives brought Randy in for questioning. He was calm, cooperative, and articulate. Yes, he knew Keith and Kent. They had been at his apartment for a party, but they left with other people. He had no idea what happened to them after that. His alibi was thin but not impossible to believe. Without physical evidence linking Randy to the murders, and with his composed demeanor during the interview, police let him go. It was a decision that would haunt the investigators involved for the rest of their careers. Randy's killing continued, but interestingly, there were periods where the murders seemed to stop entirely. Investigators later realized these pauses coincided with times when Randy was in a stable, monogamous relationship. From 1976 to 1978, Randy dated Jeff Seelig, a serious relationship that brought a degree of normalcy and structure to his life. During this period, the killings appeared to cease. But when the relationship ended, the murders resumed with renewed intensity. Randy had also changed careers. He had abandoned his teaching aspirations and moved into the burgeoning field of computer programming. He was talented, landing a well-paying job at a tech company in Orange County. He purchased a home in Long Beach. He lived openly with his partner. To neighbors and coworkers, Randy Kraft was a success story. Intelligent, professional, financially stable. No one suspected that the polite man in the suit who left for work each morning was the same person who trolled the freeways at night, hunting for victims. By the early 1980s, Randy had expanded his hunting grounds. Bodies attributed to his pattern were found not just in Southern California, but in Oregon and Michigan. He would take road trips, sometimes for work, sometimes for pleasure, and along the way, young men would disappear. The geographic spread made it even harder for law enforcement to connect the cases. A murder in Portland, another in Grand Rapids, several in San Diego County. Each investigated separately with no awareness of the larger pattern. But Randy was keeping track. He had a system, a record, a scorecard, and that scorecard would ultimately be his downfall. Before we continue, we want to hear from you. What do you think motivated Randy Kraft to keep a detailed record of his crimes? Was it arrogance, a need for control, or something darker? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. Inside Randy Kraft's car on the night of his arrest, hidden among personal papers in the trunk, investigators found something that would become one of the most chilling artifacts in the history of American crime. A single piece of paper, a list of 61 cryptic entries. No names, just coded phrases that seemed meaningless at first glance. Stable, Marine Carson, parking lot, 2 in 1 hitch, what you got, Angel, Portland elk races, Twiggy. The list was handwritten in Randy's neat, precise script. Some entries had been crossed out. Others had check marks beside them. It looked like a to-do list or perhaps a ledger of some kind. But of what? It didn't take long for investigators to make the connection. Stable could refer to Wayne Duquette, the bartender from the stable who was killed in 1971. Marine Carson likely referred to a Marine found near Carson Street. Each entry, they realized with growing horror, represented a victim. The list wasn't complete. Some entries couldn't be matched to known cases. Were these victims whose bodies had never been found? Or were they crimes that had been classified as accidents or overdoses, never investigated as homicides? As forensic teams combed through Randy's home and possessions, more evidence emerged. Photographs, Polaroids of dozens of young men, many appearing unconscious or dead. Personal items belonging to victims, clothing, jewelry, driver's licenses. Randy had kept trophies, tangible reminders of the lives he had taken. Fiber analysis linked carpet from Randy's car and home to multiple crime scenes. Paint chips matched. Hair samples corresponded. The physical evidence was overwhelming. But the scorecard remained the most damning piece of evidence. It revealed the scope of Randy's crimes in a way that shocked even seasoned homicide detectives. This wasn't a man who had killed in fits of rage or passion. This was someone who had systematically hunted, murdered, and documented his kills over more than a decade. Randy Kraft wasn't the only serial killer operating in Southern California during this period. In fact, the late 1970s and early 1980s saw a terrifying convergence of predators targeting young men along the freeways. The media would later dub them the Freeway Killers, a name that encompassed at least 3 distinct serial murderers. Patrick Kearney, known as the Trash Bag Killer, confessed to 28 murders. His victims were primarily gay men and teenage boys, many of whose bodies were found dismembered in trash bags along freeways. William Bonin, the most prolific of the 3, was convicted of 14 murders but suspected in at least 21. Like Kraft, Bonin preyed on young men and teenage boys, picking up hitchhikers and runaways. His crimes were characterized by extreme brutality and sexual sadism. The overlap in victimology and methodology created chaos for investigators. Which murders belonged to which killer? Were there additional killers operating that hadn't been identified? The scorecard helped clarify some of this, but it also raised more questions than it answered. The Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved, developing a psychological profile of the killer. The profile described an individual with above-average intelligence, someone capable of maintaining a normal facade while engaging in extreme violence. The killer would be organized, methodical, and utterly indifferent to the welfare of society or the suffering of others. The profile fit Randy Kraft perfectly. One detail in particular caught the attention of investigators. Many of Randy's victims had been found with tissue paper inserted into their nostrils. This was a method used in the military to prevent purging of bodily fluids after death, keeping the body and its surroundings cleaner during transport. Randy, with his brief stint in the Air Force, would have been familiar with this procedure. Similarly, many victims had socks or other objects inserted into the rectum, again to prevent post-mortem purging. These details suggested someone with military knowledge or training, someone who was meticulous about avoiding evidence. The connection to military bases, particularly Camp Pendleton, was impossible to ignore. A disproportionate number of Randy's victims were Marines. Camp Pendleton is located along Interstate 5, a highway that Randy traveled frequently. Young Marines, away from home for the first time, often hitchhiked between the base and nearby cities. They were vulnerable, trusting, perfect targets. Randy's professional life as a computer programmer provided him with both financial stability and flexibility. He had a respectable job that required occasional travel, giving him cover for his activities in other states. He owned a home, maintained relationships, and participated in community life. He was, by all outward appearances, a model citizen. This duality is one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. Randy Kraft lived 2 completely separate lives. By day, he was a competent, friendly professional. By night, he was a predator who tortured and killed young men with calculated precision. Psychologists and criminologists have spent decades trying to understand what drives someone like Randy Kraft. Is it a combination of nature and nurture, genetics and environment, childhood trauma, sexual orientation? The answer remains elusive. What is clear is that Randy felt no remorse, no guilt, no empathy for his victims or their families. He killed because he wanted to, because he could, and because, for more than a decade, he got away with it. The scorecard stands as a testament to his arrogance. He didn't just kill. He documented his kills as if they were accomplishments to be proud of, as if the lives he destroyed were nothing more than entries on a checklist. Investigators believe the scorecard likely represents only a portion of Randy's victims. Some entries remain unidentified. Some victims may have never made it onto the list. The true number of people Randy Kraft murdered may never be known. But the 61 entries on that list represent 61 families destroyed. 61 mothers and fathers who never got to see their sons grow old. 61 lives cut short by a man who saw other human beings as objects for his gratification. We want to take a moment to thank you for staying with us through this difficult story. We know this content is heavy, and we appreciate your willingness to engage with these true events. The best and most important parts of this story are still ahead. Stay with us. The night of May 14, 1983, began like so many others for Randy Kraft. He left his home in Long Beach and drove south along Interstate 5, heading toward San Diego. It's likely he was hunting, as he had done countless times before. At some point during the evening, Randy encountered Terry Lee Gambrell, a 25-year-old Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton. How they met is unknown. Perhaps Terry was hitchhiking. Perhaps they crossed paths at a bar. Whatever the circumstances, Terry ended up in Randy's car. What happened next followed Randy's established pattern. Drugs, alcohol, incapacitation, then torture and murder. Terry Gambrell was strangled to death, likely while Randy drove north on the interstate. But on this particular night, Randy made a critical mistake. Perhaps he had consumed too much alcohol himself. Perhaps he was exhausted. Perhaps, after more than a decade of killing without consequence, he had simply become too confident, too careless. His driving became erratic. The Toyota Celica weaved between lanes, crossing the center line multiple times, and 2 California Highway Patrol officers noticed. Officers Michael Howard and Michael Sterling pulled Randy over at approximately 1 in the morning near Mission Viejo. It was supposed to be a routine DUI stop. They had no idea they were about to crack open one of the most horrifying serial murder cases in California history. As they approached the vehicle, everything seemed normal at first. The driver, Randy Kraft, was polite and cooperative. He seemed intoxicated but not belligerent. Then Officer Sterling's flashlight illuminated the passenger seat. Terry Gambrell sat slumped against the door, his head tilted back, his eyes partially open. He was clearly dead. And Randy's response to seeing the officer's shock was chilling in its casualness. "How's my friend?" There was no panic in his voice, no fear, no attempt to explain or justify, just a simple, almost curious question. It was as if he genuinely didn't understand why the officers were alarmed. Randy was immediately arrested. The officers searched the vehicle and found a disturbing array of evidence. 9 different types of prescription medications, primarily sedatives and muscle relaxers, several empty beer bottles, and in the back seat and trunk, Polaroid photographs. Dozens of them. Young men in various states of undress, many appearing unconscious or already dead. But it was the piece of paper in the trunk that truly horrified investigators. The scorecard, the list, 61 entries that would take years to fully decode and match to known victims. A search warrant was obtained for Randy's home in Long Beach. What detectives found there removed any doubt about his guilt. The carpet fibers in his home matched fibers found on multiple victims. Clothing belonging to missing young men was discovered in his closets. Personal items, including driver's licenses and jewelry, were cataloged and matched to victims. Perhaps most damning were the photographs. Randy had documented many of his crimes on camera. Some images showed victims in various stages of being drugged. Others showed bodies in the process of being positioned or transported. The photographs were methodical, almost clinical, as if Randy was creating a visual archive of his work. Forensic analysis revealed additional connections. In one cold case from Silverado Canyon, a broken vodka bottle had been found near a victim's body. For years, that bottle sat in an evidence locker, seemingly useless. But when Randy was arrested, investigators re-examined it using newer fingerprint techniques. Randy's prints were on that bottle. Similar breakthroughs occurred in case after case. Evidence that had seemed inconclusive or insufficient in isolation suddenly formed a clear pattern when viewed through the lens of Randy's arrest. The scope of the investigation expanded rapidly. Law enforcement agencies from multiple states shared information. Detectives pored over missing persons reports, unsolved homicides, and unidentified bodies. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to piece together the full extent of Randy Kraft's crimes. Randy, for his part, maintained his composure. Even in custody, even faced with overwhelming evidence, he showed no emotion, no remorse, no admission of guilt. He invoked his right to an attorney and refused to make any statements beyond basic biographical information. His attorney would later argue that Randy was being framed, that the evidence was circumstantial, that other suspects should be considered. It was a defense that would ultimately fail, but Randy clung to it with unwavering determination. The arrest made headlines across California. The scorecard killer, the freeway killer. Randy Kraft's name became synonymous with evil, joining the ranks of Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and other notorious serial killers of that era. But unlike Bundy, who had reveled in media attention, Randy remained largely silent. He gave no interviews. He made no dramatic confessions. He simply waited, confident in his intelligence, confident in his ability to beat the system that had failed to stop him for so long. The question facing prosecutors was enormous. How do you build a case that encompasses more than a decade of murders? How do you prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that one man was responsible for such staggering carnage? The answer would take years and would result in one of the longest and most expensive trials in California history. Randy Kraft's trial began in September of 1988, more than 5 years after his arrest. The delay was necessary due to the sheer complexity of the case. Prosecutors had to decide which murders to charge, knowing they couldn't possibly include all suspected victims without the trial becoming unmanageable. Ultimately, Randy was charged with 16 murders, though prosecutors believed he was responsible for many more. The 16 cases selected were those with the strongest physical evidence: forensic matches, witness testimony, and clear connections to the scorecard. The trial lasted 13 months, making it one of the longest criminal trials in Orange County history. It was also one of the most expensive, with costs exceeding $10 million. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. They presented fiber evidence linking Randy's car and home to multiple crime scenes. They showed photographs Randy had taken of his victims. They called witnesses who testified to seeing Randy with victims shortly before their disappearances. They brought in forensic experts who explained how the scorecard entries matched specific murders. The defense strategy focused on creating reasonable doubt. Randy's attorneys argued that the evidence was circumstantial. They suggested alternative suspects, pointing to the fact that multiple serial killers were operating in the same area during the same time period. How could the jury be certain that Randy, and not Patrick Kearney or William Bonin, had committed these particular murders? They also attacked the reliability of witness testimony, noting that many witnesses were recalling events that had occurred years or even a decade earlier. Memory, they argued, was unreliable, especially after so much time had passed. And they offered an alternate explanation for the scorecard that was so absurd it would have been laughable in any other context. Randy, they claimed, had been planning a surprise birthday party for his boyfriend. The scorecard was simply a list of potential guests, coded to maintain the surprise. The entries like Maureen Carson and 2 in 1 Hitch were supposedly nicknames Randy used for friends and acquaintances. The prosecution systematically demolished this explanation. They showed how the scorecard entries corresponded precisely to details of known murders. Stable matched Wayne Duquette from the stable. Maureen Carson matched a Marine found near Carson Street. Portland elk races matched a victim found near a racetrack in Portland. The pattern was undeniable. Randy himself never took the stand. His attorneys knew that his cold, emotionless demeanor would alienate the jury. Instead, he sat silently through months of testimony, occasionally taking notes but showing no visible reaction to the horrific evidence being presented. The final arguments took 3 full days in April of 1989. The prosecution asked the jury to look at the totality of the evidence, to see the pattern, to recognize that the only logical conclusion was Randy Kraft's guilt. The defense made one last plea for reasonable doubt, urging jurors to consider the possibility, however remote, that they might be convicting the wrong man. On April 29, 1989, after deliberating for several weeks, the jury returned their verdict: guilty. on all 16 counts of murder. The courtroom erupted in tears and applause from the families of victims who had waited years for this moment. But the trial wasn't over. California law requires a separate penalty phase for capital cases, where the jury must decide whether the defendant should receive the death penalty or life in prison without possibility of parole. The penalty phase was emotionally grueling. Families of victims gave impact statements, describing the pain of losing their loved ones, the years of not knowing what had happened, the horror of learning the truth. Randy sat emotionless, showing no response to their grief. On August 11, 1989, the jury recommended the death penalty. On November 29th, Judge Donald McCartan formally sentenced Randy Kraft to death. Randy showed no emotion as the sentence was read. The next day, November 30th, Randy arrived at San Quentin State Prison and was placed on death row. He has been there ever since. The numbers associated with Randy Kraft are staggering and chilling. He was convicted of 16 murders. He was charged but not tried for an additional 29 murders. And investigators believe he may have been responsible for as many as 67 murders, possibly more. Some of the scorecard entries have never been definitively matched to known victims. Some suspected victims may not appear on the scorecard at all. The true number may never be known. In recent years, advances in DNA technology and genetic genealogy have allowed investigators to identify some of Randy's previously unknown victims. In 2023, one such breakthrough identified Michael Ray Schlicht, a 17-year-old from Iowa who disappeared in 1974. His remains had been found but unidentified for nearly 5 decades. DNA testing finally gave his family answers. This identification, coming nearly 40 years after Randy's arrest, demonstrates that the full scope of his crimes is still being understood. How many other families are still waiting for answers? How many sets of unidentified remains might be linked to Randy Kraft with further testing? Randy is now 79 years old. He remains on death row at San Quentin, where California's death penalty has been under a moratorium since 2019. He has never expressed remorse. He has never admitted guilt. To this day, he maintains his innocence, claiming he was wrongfully convicted. In prison, Randy has been described as a model inmate. Quiet, polite, keeping to himself. He reads extensively and has learned multiple foreign languages. He corresponds with a small number of people outside the prison. To those who interact with him casually, he seems like a harmless, intelligent old man. But the families of his victims know differently. They know that behind that mild exterior is someone who tortured and killed young men for his own gratification. Someone who kept a scorecard of his victims like a hunter tallying game. Someone who showed no mercy and deserves none in return. The case of Randy Kraft raises profound questions about the nature of evil. How does someone who appears so normal, so intelligent, so integrated into society, commit such monstrous acts? What combination of factors creates a serial killer? Researchers have studied Randy extensively, looking for answers. Some point to possible neurological damage from his childhood head injuries. Others focus on psychological factors, including the stress of living as a closeted gay man in an era of intense homophobia. Still others argue that some people are simply born without the capacity for empathy, born predators who will inevitably harm others given the opportunity. The truth is likely a complex interaction of all these factors and more. Randy Kraft is a reminder that evil doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a mask or carry a sign. Sometimes it wears glasses and a suit, drives a nice car, and smiles politely at its neighbors. The families of Randy's victims continue to live with the aftermath of his crimes. Many have spent decades advocating for victims' rights, working to ensure that other families don't experience the same pain they endured. Their strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable tragedy is a testament to the human spirit. As for the scorecard, it remains in evidence storage, a chilling reminder of one man's depravity. 61 entries, 61 lives, 61 families forever changed, and perhaps, hidden in those cryptic codes, answers still waiting to be discovered. The case of Randy Kraft forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the world we live in. Monsters are real. They walk among us, They don't look like monsters. They look like our neighbors, our coworkers, the person in line behind us at the grocery store. Randy Kraft was intelligent, successful, and seemingly well-adjusted. He had friends who cared about him. He had partners who loved him. He had co-workers who respected him. And yet, beneath that facade, he was a predator who took at least 16 lives, and probably many more. The scorecard remains one of the most disturbing artifacts in the history of American crime. It reveals a mind that not only killed without remorse but took pride in those killings, documenting them like accomplishments. It speaks to an arrogance and a complete absence of empathy that is almost incomprehensible to those of us who value human life. We want to know what you think. Do you believe Randy Kraft committed all 67 murders suggested by the scorecard? Or could the number be even higher? What do you think motivated him to keep such a detailed record of his crimes? And how do we, as a society, prevent future Randy Krafts from operating undetected for years? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read every comment and we value your perspective on these difficult cases. If this investigation impacted you, please subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of cases that changed criminal history. Click the bell icon to be notified whenever we release a new episode. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories with the depth and respect they deserve. And don't miss our next recommended video, where we explore another case that shocked the nation. Click now and continue this investigative journey with us. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay informed, stay aware, and remember that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail.